Hi guys, this lesson is on section 4.6. 4.6 is actually two parts, solving absolute value equations and inequalities. I broke it up for you guys to make it easier. So this part one is just going to be solving absolute value equations. And I'll make another video with part two for the inequalities part of it. Okay, so before we begin, a reminder, definition of absolute value. It's the distance from zero on a number line. So if you remember, absolute value cannot be a negative number. Okay, so remember that. Cannot be negative because you cannot have a negative distance. Okay, so if I have an equation that looks like this, absolute value of x is equal to 3. What this is asking is, what numbers are 3 units away from 0 on a number line? So 3 units away from 0 on the number line. Here's my number line. So if I have a 3 and a negative 3, there are my two answers. I'm going to have two answers for this. So I could write it two ways. I could write x is equal to negative 3 and 3, or I could just write it x is equal to plus or minus 3. Okay. Either way works. But whenever you have absolute value, you're going to have two answers when you have a variable inside of the absolute value. Okay. That's an easy one because they gave you the isolated absolute value. In this equation, if I have absolute value of x plus 4 is equal to 8, I need to isolate the absolute value. So whatever is outside of the absolute value, I need to get it to the other side of the equal sign. So if this is my equal sign, I need to get over. So I minus 4 and I minus 4. And if you notice, I have nice long lines for the absolute value. Be careful with this, especially when you start making a lot of absolute values. So be careful that you have nice long absolute values so you can tell versus it being like this. So make sure you don't just go like this. Okay, you might throw yourself off. Okay, so make nice big absolute value signs. Once you isolate it, I can just go into x is equal to plus or minus 4 because that's the only thing inside of the absolute value. Okay, so pretty simple. If I have something like this and I minus 5 and I minus 5, I get the absolute value of x is equal to negative 2. And this is saying what values of x or what numbers are negative 2 away from 0. And so my answer you should know is going to be no, so, because there's nothing that is negative 2 units away or negative 2 distance away from 0. So if you ever come out to an absolute value, when you isolate it equals to a negative number, your answer will always be no, so, okay? So if you ever have that. Okay, now we're going to start doing a couple more different ones. So I have a couple more examples here. So now, same thing, if I have something outside of the absolute value, I need to isolate it. So all I do is divide both of these by 3. If you see 3 absolute value of x like this, that's like saying multiply. It's like saying 3 times absolute value of x. Okay? So divide by 3, that gets rid of the outside, and now you're left with absolute value of x is equal to 5. And because it's isolated, I can just say x is equal to plus or minus 5. Okay? Don't forget the plus or minus. Or if you only put 5, you only have half the answer, so you can get some wrong. You can get half off. Okay? So over here, this is just like another equation. And it's like a two-step equation. If I have 5 times the absolute value of x minus 6, I need to get rid of the 6 first. Okay? So when I get rid of that, I get 10 is equal to 5 times absolute value of x. Okay. And then I need to divide by 5 to get rid of this 5. And I get 2 is equal to the absolute value of x. And I can just rewrite it, x is equal to plus or minus 2. Okay. If you left the 2 on the right-hand side, and sorry, I see that it's glaring. If you left the 2 on the left-hand side, the plus or minus 2, and the x on the right, that's fine too. Okay. So homework check number 1. And this is to see who's watching the video and who's not. Okay. I want you to write the word happy on your homework check paper. Okay, you have to write the word happy on it somewhere. If you do not have the word happy on it when I check, it will be incomplete. And please don't tell other people to do it either. Just write it somewhere and write the word happy. And then write this equation and solve it. Okay? So I do want to see work. Some people ask, do I have to show work? Yes, you always have to show work, whether it's a homework check or whether it's homework. Okay, so I'm looking for the word happy, and this is homework check number 1, and homework check number 2 will be coming up later. Okay, so here I have a couple more absolute value equations. But you can see these are going to be a little different in that instead of just having an x in the absolute value, I have 2x plus 5 or 3x minus 1. Okay. Once you have absolute value isolated, if you remember before I had that when it was x is equal to 3, I could just go x is equal to plus or minus 3 this way. Or the other way that I did it was I could split it to x is equal to 3 or x is equal to negative 3. You could rewrite it twice. Okay, so whatever was in the absolute value could make it negative and positive. In this case, when I have a binomial inside of the binomial means two terms inside of the absolute value, you just split it. Okay. Once you have the absolute value isolated, so there's nothing outside of it on this side of the equal sign, I can split it. And I go 2x plus 5 is equal to negative 11, and 2x plus 5 is equal to positive 11. So you can see I just take that positive one there, and then when I put this side, I put it negative. Okay. I just solve them individually, and I get 2x is equal to negative 16, divide by 2, and x is equal to negative 8. Okay? And when I minus 5 on this side, I get 2x is equal to 6, divide by 2, and x is going to equal to 3. So there's my two answers. Instead of having plus and minus, I have two different answers. And sorry, to make it easy, there it is. So if I put a negative 8 in here, that becomes true. And if I put a 3 in there, that would also become true. The 3 is easy. You can see that becomes 6 plus 5, absolute value of 11 is 11. But if I put a negative 8 in there, that's negative 16, plus 5 is negative 11. But the absolute value of negative 11 is also 11. So both answers work. Okay. You do not need to check it. You can do a visual check instead of writing out all the work to check. Okay, over here I have an equation with the negative 4 outside of the absolute value. So I need to isolate it. So I need to add 4 to both sides. So I get 3x minus 1 absolute value is equal to 11. Okay. Notice I'm leaving the absolute value on when I added the 4. And now now that it's isolated, now I can split it. So I get 3x minus 1 is equal to negative 11. 3x minus 1 is equal to positive 11. Okay. I'm going to solve those individually. So if I plus 1, 3x is equal to negative 10. Divide by 3. X is equal to negative 3 and 1/3 here. If I plus 1, 3x is equal to 12. Divide by 3. And x is equal to 4. So I have two different answers that if I put in there would work. Okay, that's how you do those. I have one more problem that's a little more complicated, but if you understand it so far, you'll get it. So here's the other problem. Now I have the 2 times absolute value x minus 3 plus 5. So in the same way you would solve an equation, I need to isolate my absolute value. So I'm going to minus 5 first. I'm sorry, that's hard to see, so I'm going to make it better. And I get 2 times absolute value of x minus 3 is equal to 4. Okay. Now I got to get rid of this 2, so I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And now I've got absolute value of x minus 3 is equal to 2. And now that I have the absolute value isolated by itself on the left side of the equal sign, I can split it. Okay. So I'm going to get x minus 3 is equal to negative 2, and x minus 3 is equal to positive 2. Okay. Now I solve them individually. If I plus 3 on this side, I get x is equal to 1. And if I plus 3 on this side, I get x is equal to 5. So if I stick a 1 in there or a 5 in there, I will get a 9 on the far end. Okay, so the main thing with these absolute values is first you want to do is isolate them, get everything outside of that absolute value to the other side of the equal sign. And once you have it isolated like this, you split it and you make it into a -2 on this side and then a +2 on that side. Okay, here's another example here. And then I'll show you the homework check too. So my example on the top, I have 5 times absolute value of 6x minus 4 plus 7. So when I minus 7 from both sides, I get 5 times absolute value of 6x minus 4 is equal to -5. When I divide by 5, now that I have my absolute value isolated, and I get -1, that should throw up a red flag already. And I'll rewrite it so you can see it, I'm sorry. 6x minus 4 is equal to -1. Once you have an absolute value equal to negative, what's your answer? Okay, it is no so. Okay, but be careful, because if there was a negative here outside like that and a negative here, you cannot just stop and say no so there, because you still have another -5 outside of the absolute value. So when you divide by negative, it would actually change it to a positive. Okay, so you got to isolate your absolute value first, and after you isolate it, if it equals to a negative number, any negative number, it is no so. Okay, so on this one I divided by 5 to go back to what it looks like. Okay, so homework check number 2 is right here. Please write this equation down. Please show the work and then answer it on Edmodo. I do again, I want you to answer it on Edmodo now before you come to class. If you try to do it in class, I will mark it late. Okay, so make sure you do it now with the video. Okay, hope this helps. And again, this is part 1, absolute value equations, and I will do part 2 next. Take care.